Daniel Reese stood in the dim light of the basement, the air thick with the musty scent of old carpet and dust. He had only recently moved into his late Uncle Cal's house, a sprawling Victorian that had seen better days. The walls were a patchwork of peeling paint and faded memories, and the basement, with its low ceilings and dim corners, felt especially claustrophobic. Daniel had come to renovate, to breathe new life into the home that had been a silent witness to his family's fragmented history. Yet as he swung the crowbar against the drywall, he felt more like a trespasser in a graveyard than a renovator. The wall crumbled beneath the force of his strike, revealing a hidden door that had gone unnoticed in the blueprints. It was an old door, its surface marred by years of neglect, the knob tarnished and stiff. Curiosity tugged at him, and he wiped sweat from his brow before reaching for the handle. It turned with an unexpected ease, and the door creaked open to reveal a room that shouldn't exist. Inside was a perfect replica of his childhood bedroom, a space he hadn't seen in nearly 3 decades. There was the familiar Spider-Man lamp, its light bulb flickering weakly, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air. The bed was made with a faded blue comforter, and on the dresser sat a weathered family photo. He stared at it, heart racing as he realized it depicted a moment he believed was lost to time. Oh, there he was, age 9, grinning widely, surrounded by his mother and Uncle Cal. But there was someone else in the picture, a figure he didn't recognize, standing just behind him. The edges of the photograph were worn, as if it had been handled countless times. Yet the image was as clear as his memory of that very day except for the stranger lurking in the background. Daniel stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath him, and a shiver of nostalgia washed over him. The wallpaper, faded and peeling, was exactly as he remembered. The toy action figures, a dusty teddy bear, and a half-assembled Lego set were all in their rightful places. But something felt off, as if the room was too perfect, too curated, as if someone had been watching him and meticulously reconstructing his past. He shook his head, trying to dispel the creeping unease that settled into his bones. "It's just a trick of the light," he muttered to himself. "It's an old house playing games." But deep down, a gnawing anxiety began to take root. Over the next few days, Daniel found himself returning to the room more often. He'd tell himself it was for the sake of renovation, to clear it out and make it his own. At each visit felt like a descent into a dream, where he was both the dreamer and the dreamt. He would sit on the edge of the bed, running his fingers over the familiar textures, and lose himself in memories that felt both comforting and suffocating. He avoided thinking about why he had come back to his childhood home in the first place, choosing instead to drown himself in nostalgia. One night, after too many drinks, Daniel sprawled out on the floor of the basement, the dull thud of his heart echoing in his ears. Sleep tugged at him, and he surrendered to it, the darkness wrapping around him like an old, familiar blanket. He didn't realize how much time had passed until he woke to the sound of a creaking door. The bedroom door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the dark basement. He could have sworn he had closed it tightly before falling asleep. Heart racing, he pushed himself up and stumbled toward the door, drawn by an inexplicable urge. As he stepped inside, the air thickened, and the light flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Inside the room, everything had changed. The bed sheets were different, a bright yellow with cartoon dinosaurs, and the toys were rearranged in a way he didn't recognize. On the nightstand, a new photo had appeared, one that showed him as he looked now, standing in the room, asleep. The realization crashed over him like a wave. Someone or something was updating the room in real time. Panic surged through him, and he stumbled back, crashing into the doorframe. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, voice echoing off the walls. The room remained silent, the stillness almost mocking him. He felt the weight of 1,000 memories pressing down on him, memories he had tried so hard to forget. Daniel spent the next few days in a feverish state, oscillating between denial and obsession. He scoured the room, looking for clues, for signs of who or what was behind this bizarre phenomenon. The more he searched, the more he felt the room pulling him in, beckoning him to stay. A small part of him wanted to embrace the comfort of the past, to let the weight of adult responsibilities slip away. But another part of him knew he couldn't surrender to it. On a particularly restless night, Daniel decided to confront the room head-on. He stormed in, heart pounding, and demanded, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The room responded with silence, the air thick with tension. He glanced at the mirror above the dresser, expecting to see his reflection. Instead, he caught a flicker of movement something behind him, just out of sight. "Show yourself," he shouted, but the room remained still. Frustration boiled over, and he began tearing at the wallpaper, ripping it away in a frenzy. He smashed the toys against the floor, feeling a surge of anger and desperation. But no matter what he did, the room remained intact, as if it were alive, healing itself with every blow. Exhausted and panting, Daniel collapsed onto the bed, his heart racing. As he lay there, staring at the ceiling, he felt a strange pull, as if the room was reaching out to him. He turned his head and noticed something beneath the bed, a journal. It was small, bound in worn leather, and as he pulled it out, he felt a rush of cold air wash over him. The journal was filled with the scrawl of a child's handwriting, dated years after he had left the house. Each entry detailed his daily life, his struggles, his regrets. The words echoed his own thoughts, his own fears, written by someone watching him, someone who knew him intimately. The final entry sent chills down his spine. "I hope he remembers me. I hope he comes back." The weight of realization crashed over him like a tsunami. This room was a prison built not just of nostalgia, but of his own trauma. It was a reflection of his fractured self, a space where the past could observe him, where his childhood fears had manifested into something tangible. The Watcher, this unseen presence, was a part of him, a fragment of his own psyche that had never let go. As he lay there, the journal heavy in his hands, Daniel felt the lines between reality and memory blur. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. When he opened them again, he was no longer lying on the bed as an adult. He was a child again, small and vulnerable, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of his childhood room. Daniel blinked, disoriented, and scrambled to his feet. He looked around, the room now vibrant and alive, filled with the echoes of laughter and the distant sounds of a television playing in the background. He felt an urge to run, to escape, but as he moved toward the door, he heard a voice, a soft whispering call that made his heart race. "Daniel," it beckoned, warm and familiar, yet tinged with something darker. He hesitated, glancing back at the room that had ensnared him. Outside the door, he could hear another version of himself, the adult Daniel knocking softly, pleading to come in. "Let me in," the voice called, echoing in the space between them. But as he turned back to the room, he felt the walls closing in, the memories crashing over him like waves, pulling him deeper into a past he couldn't escape. The door creaked open, and he caught a glimpse of the adult Daniel, his face twisted in confusion and fear. "What's happening?" the adult Daniel asked, voice strained. "You need to come back." But the child Daniel felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He was home. "Who are you?" the child asked, trembling. "I'm you," the adult replied, desperation in his eyes. "You need to remember. You need to come back with me." But before the child could respond, the door slammed shut, and the room began to morph around him, memories swirling together in a kaleidoscope of color and sound. The air grew thick with the scent of dust and nostalgia, the walls pulsing as if they were alive, breathing in the remnants of joy and pain. As the adult Daniel pounded on the door from the other side, the child felt a sinking realization wash over him. He was trapped in a loop of memory, cycle of trauma that refused to release its grip. The past was not just a shadow. It was a living entity, and it would not let him go. The last thing he heard was the muffled voice of the adult Daniel calling out, "Let me in, please." And then the room faded into darkness, leaving only the lingering echoes of a childhood that had never truly left him. Mara Quinn sat cross-legged on the floor of the dimly lit living room, the only illumination coming from the flickering candle she had set on the table beside her. Shadows danced across the walls of her grandfather's cabin, twisting and stretching like the memories she had of him, fleeting, elusive. The musty scent of aged wood and the cold, biting air creeping through the cracks filled her lungs, grounding her in the moment, yet reminding her of the isolation that surrounded them. In her hand, she clutched a handwritten letter. The ink smudged and faded. It had been the last thing her grandfather had penned before his death, a final warning that sent a chill down her spine. "Do not open the basement door. No matter what you hear." The words echoed in her mind, a mantra of dread. "Mom, I'm going to check out the treehouse." Eli's voice broke through the stillness, his small figure darting past her like a wisp of wind. She watched him go, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. At 9, Eli was the kind of boy who saw magic in the mundane, who could find adventure in the rustling leaves or the creaking floorboards of the old cabin. She had brought him here to reconnect with their family roots, hoping to weave some semblance of belonging into the fabric of their lives after the upheaval of her divorce. Yet, beneath her smile, a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. She read the letter again, the warning stark against the backdrop of her thoughts. It felt absurd to take it seriously. Her grandfather had always been a man of peculiar habits, a recluse who had shunned the outside world. But even as she dismissed the notion, something primal tugged at her, urging caution. The wind howled outside, and the cabin creaked in response. But it was not the wind that drew Eli's attention. He paused, tilting his head as though listening to a distant rhythm. Mara felt a shiver crawl up her spine, an inexplicable sense of something lurking beneath the surface. "Eli, stay close," she called, but he was already disappearing up the staircase, his curiosity leading him away. She sighed, pushing the letter down beside her as she rose to follow him, the floorboards groaning under her weight. As night fell, the cabin transformed. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching like fingers reaching out for the light. Mara tucked Eli into bed, his eyes wide with excitement and a hint of apprehension. "Do you think Grandpa's still here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mara hesitated, the question twisting in her heart. "He's with us, Eli. Always." She kissed his forehead, wishing she could believe the words she spoke. As she left the room, she heard the rhythmic thudding again, a persistent sound echoing from below. It was as if something was calling to her, beckoning her closer. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams haunted by vague shapes and whispers. She awoke to the sound of Eli's soft voice, the glow of the candle illuminating his small face. "Mom, I heard it again. It's louder now," he said, his eyes wide with fear. "What did you hear?" she asked, struggling to shake off the remnants of sleep. "The thumping. It's like it wants to get out." Eli's voice trembled, and Mara felt her heart race. She wanted to dismiss it, to tell him it was just the old house settling, but something in his gaze told her otherwise. A chill crept through the cabin, and as she turned to reassure him, the candle flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted and writhed. "Let's go check it out together," she said, forcing a calmness into her voice. She grabbed a flashlight and led Eli down the creaking stairs. The basement door loomed before them, old and heavy, its surface marred with age. Sense of foreboding wrapped around Mara like a shroud. "We shouldn't," she whispered, glancing at Eli, who stared wide at the door, as if it were a portal to another world. But curiosity gnawed at her, an insatiable hunger to uncover the truth. "Just a quick look," she decided. "We'll be careful." Tom, her brother, appeared at the top of the stairs, his laid-back demeanor contrasting sharply with the tension in the air. "What are you two doing?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're not seriously thinking about going down there, are you?" Mara opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She could see the skepticism in his eyes, the way he dismissed their grandfather's warning as mere superstition. "We just want to see what's down there," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You're both nuts," Tom chuckled, but there was an edge of concern beneath his laughter. "Let's just enjoy the cabin, all right? It's supposed to be a getaway, not a haunted house." But the thudding grew louder, reverberating through the walls, drowning out Tom's words. Mara felt a pull, a gravity that drew her closer to the door. "I have to know," she said, almost to herself. With a deep breath, she turned the knob and pushed the door open. The hinges protested with a low groan, and they descended into the darkness, the flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. The basement was small and cramped, the air thick with a metallic scent that made Mara's stomach churn. The walls were bare stone, damp and cold, but what caught her attention was a section of the floor, slightly raised as if something had been buried beneath. Ancient symbols were etched into the stone, their meanings lost to time, and a chill coursed through her as she traced her fingers over them. "Mom, look," Eli whispered, pointing to the far corner. There, against the wall, were shackles, still warm, as though they had recently held something captive. Mara's heart raced with a mix of dread and curiosity. Why had her grandfather kept this hidden? Maybe we should go, Tom suggested, his voice trembling. This feels wrong. But Mara was rooted to the spot, her mind racing with questions. What had her grandfather been protecting them from? What had he locked away? As if in answer, the thudding intensified, a rhythmic pulse that resonated within her bones. Then suddenly, silence enveloped them. The air grew thick, and a sensation of being watched settled over her. Mara felt her breath hitch in her throat, and before she could think, she turned and fled up the stairs, dragging Eli behind her. Tom followed, his face pale. They burst into the living room, the candle flickering wildly. What was that? Tom gasped, his bravado shattered. Eli, trembling, clutched his drawings. Scattered across the table symbols he had never seen before, yet they mirrored the ones in the basement. Something isn't right, Mara said, her voice barely a whisper. She felt the weight of the letter in her pocket, a reminder of the warning she had ignored. We shouldn't have gone down there. That night, sleep eluded them. Mara lay awake, listening to Eli's soft breaths, but her mind was consumed by the images from the basement. The shackles, the symbols, the absence of whatever had been held captive. She woke in the early hours to find Tom sitting on the edge of her bed, his face pale and drawn. I had a dream, he murmured, eyes glazed. Grandpa was there. He said, You've let it in. Mara's heart raced. What do you mean? He was whispering. About the basement. And then I saw it, Mom. I saw something moving. He shivered, and Mara felt a chill run down her spine. The next day, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. Eli, who had always been quiet, began drawing more symbols, his focus unnaturally intense. Look, Mom, he exclaimed, showing her a page filled with intricate designs that seemed to pulse with life. They're telling me stories. Mara's heart sank. Stories about the thing in the basement, Eli said, his voice low and serious. It says it was trapped, that it just wants to be free. No, Eli. Work. Her voice was firm, but doubt gnawed at her. We don't listen to that. It's just a story. But as the days passed, the cabin changed. The walls began to shift. Hallways that had once been straight now twisted and turned. Rooms that had been there one moment vanished the next. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the corridors, filling the space with a cacophony of voices that seeped into their thoughts. Mara struggled to keep her family together, but the bound one was relentless. It wove itself into their memories, crafting illusions that blurred the lines between reality and nightmare. She called, but he didn't respond. Instead, he reached out, his small fingers tracing the air as if painting something unseen. In that moment, Mara realized the true horror. The bound one didn't need to attack. It unraveled them from the inside, replacing their memories with its own. She felt herself slipping, the rationality she had clung to fraying like an old rope. Tom, she screamed, shaking her brother awake. We have to do something. But when Tom looked at her, she saw the doubt in his eyes. What if we just leave? He suggested, desperation creeping into his voice. What if we just walk away? Mara knew it was too late for that. The cabin had become a labyrinth, a living entity that thrived on their fear. She felt the weight of her grandfather's legacy pressing down on her, the responsibility to protect her son from the darkness that had been unleashed. I can't let it take him, she whispered, a resolve hardening within her. I have to finish what Grandpa started. As the night deepened, Mara descended into the basement once more, the air thick with foreboding. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the thudding beneath her feet. She found the shackles still warm, the weight of her decision heavy on her chest. Mara took a deep breath and began etching the runes into the stone with her blood. Each stroke felt like a piece of her soul being sacrificed. "Eli," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I love you. I'm so sorry." The Bound One's presence filled the room, pressing against her mind, whispering promises of freedom and power. But Mara held firm. Knowing the truth, the only way to imprison it was to become its warden, just as her grandfather had done. As she finished the last symbol, the room trembled, the walls vibrating with an ancient energy. Dark shape began to form in the corner, a silhouette of the thing that had been trapped for centuries. It reached out, fingers stretching toward her, but Mara stood her ground. "I won't let you take him," she cried, sealing herself within the confines of the room. The shadows thickened, and she felt the weight of the entity pressing down, but she whispered Eli's name, her voice fading into the darkness. In the years that followed, the cabin remained silent, its secrets buried deep beneath the earth. Eli grew up, the memories of that fateful summer fading like the light of the setting sun. But as he returned to the cabin as an adult, a sense of foreboding washed over him. He stood before the basement door, the weight of his mother's sacrifice heavy on his heart. In his pocket lay a note, one he had written with trembling hands. "Do not open the basement door." As the wind howled through the trees, Eli felt the thudding beneath his feet, a rhythmic pulse echoing in the silence. And for the first time, he understood the price of curiosity and the burden of inherited responsibility. With a deep breath, he turned away from the door, the shadows whispering his name, a haunting reminder of what lay beneath. Evan Cross drove through the night, the tires of his rig humming against the cracked asphalt of the forgotten stretch of desert highway. The world outside his windshield was a blur of shadows and flickering headlights. A dark canvas painted with the occasional silhouette of distant mountains, ghostly under the pale moonlight. Inside the cab, the air was thick with a stale mix of coffee and the faint metallic scent of the truck's engine. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was well past midnight. He was alone, as always, but solitude had become a familiar companion. It wrapped around him like a thick fog, isolating him from the world he had once been part of. The radio crackled softly, a low murmur of static, and he reached out to turn it off, preferring the silence. Silence was easier to handle than the memories that played on an endless loop in his mind. Just as he was about to lose himself in thought, he spotted a figure standing by the shoulder-alone hitchhiker, shrouded in darkness. Evan's heart raced, a familiar dread creeping in. He had heard the stories that urban legends whispered among truckers at rest stops. The hitchhiker who never blinked. The man who knew your secrets. But the road was long, and he knew he couldn't just drive past. He pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. The hitchhiker climbed into the cab without a word, the door creaking as he settled into the passenger seat. The man was unnervingly still, his eyes locked on Evan with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He wore a weathered jacket, and his hair was unkempt, a wild halo around his head. Evan stole a glance at him, the man's gaze unyielding, and felt an inexplicable chill. "Nice night," Evan muttered, trying to break the silence. The hitchhiker didn't respond. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, the corners of his mouth twitching into what might have been a smile. "You left the back door open that night," he whispered, his voice low and gravelly. Evan slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt on the deserted highway. His heart pounded in his chest. Hadn't told anyone about that detail, not even June. "What did you say?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The hitchhiker turned to him, his eyes never wavering. "You were too busy to notice," he said, his tone dripping with an unsettling familiarity. "Too busy to savor." Evan clenched his jaw, the memories flooding back. His daughter, the accident, the guilt that had consumed him ever since. "Get out," he ordered, panic rising in his throat. But the hitchhiker remained, his expression unchanged. "You can't run from what you carry," he said softly. "You're not the only one who's lost something on this road." Evan's heart raced as he stared ahead into the dark void of the highway. Air felt heavy, the weight of the hitchhiker's words pressing down on him. He had spent years driving, trying to outrun the ghosts of his past. But here was one sitting right beside him, as if summoned from the depths of his own despair. "Just drive," the hitchhiker said, his voice steady. "I won't tell anyone your secrets." Evan's hands trembled on the wheel, but he couldn't bring himself to throw the man out. Instead, he pressed down on the gas, the truck lurching forward into the night. They drove in silence for what felt like an eternity, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. Evan stole glances at the hitchhiker, but the man's eyes remained fixed ahead, unblinking. After what felt like hours, Evan pulled off the highway into a small diner, the neon sign buzzing in the darkness. He needed coffee, needed to clear his head. As he parked, he felt the hitchhiker's gaze on him, unyielding and penetrating. "You'll regret this," the man said as they climbed out. "Regret what?" Evan snapped, frustration boiling over. "Every choice has its price," the hitchhiker replied, his voice low. "You don't know what you're getting into." Inside the diner, the air was thick with the aroma of burnt coffee and grease. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the linoleum floor. Evan slid into a booth, the vinyl seat sticky beneath him. The hitchhiker chose to sit opposite him, leaning forward, eyes still fixed on Evan. "Why do you do this?" Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you wait here?" The hitchhiker smiled faintly. "I collect memories," he said. "Regrets, like good of people like you driven by guilt. Haunted by the past. You think you're the first to stop for me?" Evan's stomach twisted. "What do you mean, collect?" "I take what you carry," the hitchhiker explained, his tone almost soothing. "In exchange, I offer a release, a chance to let go." Evan shook his head, disbelief washing over him. "Let go? You think you can just take away my pain?" The hitchhiker leaned back, his expression unreadable. "You don't understand? You're already empty. You just don't know it yet." Evan's chest tightened, and he felt the room closing in around him. He had come to this diner for comfort, but all he felt was dread. "What happens when you take it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Then I blink," the hitchhiker replied, his eyes finally shifting, narrowing slightly, as if the very act of speaking had been a strain. "And you're free." Evan's heart raced at the thought. "What happens to you?" The hitchhiker smiled, a glint of something dark in his eyes. "I become whole again." Evan felt the walls of the diner closing in, the laughter of other patrons fading into an echo. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need to go," he said, his voice firm but shaky. As he turned to leave, the hitchhiker called after him. "You'll be back, Evan. They always come back." Evan stepped outside, the cold night air hitting him like a slap. The hitchhiker followed, and they climbed back into the truck. The hum of the engine filled the silence, but the tension between them crackled like static. Evan's mind raced, and he felt the weight of the hitchhiker's presence pressing down on him. "You're not going to just forget this," the hitchhiker said, his voice low and steady. "Can't escape your past." "Why do you keep saying that?" Evan snapped, frustration boiling over. "I'm not like you. I don't want anything from you." "Then why did you stop?" the hitchhiker countered, his eyes unblinking and unwavering. "You're curious, aren't you? You want to know what I know?" Evan's grip tightened on the wheel, and he fought back the urge to scream. "I don't want anything from you," he shouted, his voice echoing in the empty night. The hitchhiker leaned closer, his face inches from Evan's. "You're a man trapped in his own grief, Evan. You're searching for something you think you'll find out here, but you won't. You'll only find me." Evan's breath hitched as the truth settled in like a heavy stone in his gut. He had been searching for answers, for closure, but all he found was this unsettling man who seemed to know everything about him. "I don't want to talk to you," he said, his voice shaking. The hitchhiker's lips curled into a smile, a knowing look in his eyes. "But you will. You'll come back to me. You'll want to share your burdens." Evan turned the truck back onto the highway, the tires crunching against the gravel. The dark road stretched before him, an endless ribbon leading to nowhere. He could feel the hitchhiker's gaze boring into him, unyielding and unblinking, and a sense of dread washed over him. As the miles passed, Evan's mind raced, the memories of his daughter flooding back. He could see her laughter, hear her voice, feel the warmth of her presence. But it was all gone now, replaced by the cold grip of guilt that had followed him like a shadow. He glanced at the hitchhiker, whose expression remained unchanged, and felt an unsettling realization settle in. He needed to know more. He needed to confront this specter of his past. "Tell me what you know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The hitchhiker's smile widened, revealing a hint of something dark and predatory. "You're finally ready to listen," he said, his tone almost gleeful. "Let's talk about your daughter." Evan's heart raced, the words igniting a fire within him.
Hey!
He demanded, desperation creeping into his voice. "Everything," the hitchhiker replied, his gaze unwavering. "I know about the night you lost her, the choices you made, the doors you left open." Evan felt the walls of the truck closing in, the air growing thick with memories he had tried to bury. "Stop," he said, his voice trembling. "Just stop." But the hitchhiker leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "You can't escape the truth, Evan. You need to face it. You need to let go. Go." In that moment, the truck swerved, the world outside blurring into darkness. Evan's heart raced as he struggled to maintain control, the weight of the hitchhiker's words pressing down on him. "What do you want from me?" he shouted, panic rising in his chest. "Only what you're willing to give," the hitchhiker replied, his tone almost soothing. "I'm here to help you release your burdens. All you need to do is share your pain." Evan's grip on the wheel tightened, anger boiling over. "I don't need your help. I don't need anything from you." The hitchhiker's expression shifted, a glint of something dark flashing in his eyes. "You think you can outrun your grief? Think you can drive away from the truth?" Evan's mind raced, the memories flooding back in a rush. The accident, the screams, the guilt that had consumed him ever since. He felt the weight of it pressing down on him, suffocating him. "I can't do this," he said, his voice breaking. "Then let me take it," the hitchhiker said, his voice low and hypnotic. "Let me carry your burden. You'll be free." Evan's heart raced as he considered the offer. Could he really let go? Could he truly be free of the pain that had haunted him for so long? "What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Just share your truth," the hitchhiker replied, his gaze unblinking and unwavering. "Tell me everything. You're already empty, remember?" With trembling hands, Evan took a deep breath, the weight of his guilt crashing down around him. "I was supposed to protect her," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't do enough. I should have been there." The hitchhiker leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "Tell me more," he urged, his voice low and coaxing. Evan felt the words spilling out, the memories flooding back in a rush. "I left the back door open that night. I thought she was safe. I thought she was asleep. But she wasn't. She was out there, and I didn't know." The hitchhiker's expression remained unchanged, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made Evan feel exposed. "You're almost there," he said, his voice a whisper. "What else?" Evan's heart raced as he continued, the memories crashing over him like waves. "I should have saved her," he cried, his voice breaking. "I should have done something, anything, but I didn't." The hitchhiker leaned closer, his eyes never leaving Evan's. "You're empty now," he said softly. "You have nothing left to take." Evan felt a strange sense of release wash over him, the weight of his guilt lifting as he poured out his heart. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed, the tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save her." The hitchhiker smiled, a glint of something dark in his eyes. "Now, let go." Evan took a deep breath, the pain of his past washing over him one last time. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the darkness that surrounded him. "I let go," he whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. Then, for the first time, the hitchhiker blinked. The world went dark. When Evan opened his eyes, the highway was empty, the truck silent. He was alone. The weight of his guilt was gone, replaced by a strange sense of clarity. He felt lighter, unburdened, but as he looked around, he realized something was different. The memories of his daughter were still there, but they felt distant, like a fading dream. He could see her smile, hear her laughter, but it was as if they belonged to someone else. He felt a strange emptiness inside him, a void where his pain had once resided. As he sat in the silence of the empty highway, a chill ran down his spine. Something else was there, something lurking just beyond his perception. He could feel it, a presence beside him, a shadow that whispered secrets he couldn't quite grasp. Evan gripped the steering wheel, his heart racing as he realized the truth. He had let go, but in doing so, he had opened a door to something darker. The hitchhiker had taken his pain, but now something else rode in its place. He glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw the hitchhiker's smile reflected back at him. But when he blinked, It was gone. The highway stretched before him, endless and empty, and as he drove into the night, couldn't shake the feeling that the cycle was far from over. The road was still there, waiting, and he knew he would never truly escape. And somewhere in the shadows, the hitchhiker watched, unblinking,